Hello and welcome back to another week of the DP World Tour picks and bets. Skylar Hoke joined with Tom Jacobs. Tom, fresh off a week of potential Ryder Cup participants battling it out, it looks the closer that we're getting Rasmus Højgaard, despite losing out by a stroke and playing a little bit of I guess, not much of a contender role, I'd say, on Sunday. I don't want to say choked it away, but Marco Penge kind of took it from him for his second victory of the year. What were your thoughts overall at the Danish Golf Championship?
Yeah, I think ultimately it looked like Rasmus was kind of running away with it, and it was a pretty impressive performance at home. He'd won it already and in the past, and to do that when you're kind of chasing a Ryder Cup spot, I thought was really impressive, and kind of more on that later. But really, the impressive thing was Penge, right? Just coming in and taking it, and we discussed the last couple of weeks whether it's kind of Raitan or Penge that we were most kind of impressed by, and all of a sudden it flip flops to Marco again, right? I mean, second at the Scottish Open, wins again for the second time this season. Just that, I guess I still haven't quite got over the disappointment with him at the Open Championship. But I think if you hold on to that of any, like Ludwig Aberg missed the Open Championship cut last year and things like that. Ultimately, you just have to accept these things happen to the best of players, and that shouldn't really affect our current thoughts on him. So yeah, I think great to see those two really go for it. I think it's now Højgaard tied 29th or better, basically gets him into the Ryder Cup because there's no other qualifying events after this, and it's Shane Lowry.
I mean, I knew he was close and had the chance on points, but man, if you just top of the head say who's had a better 12 months, it's hard to think that Rasmus is going to do it. I mean, you'd think a T29 is pretty reasonable for him to do that, right? I know he's on your betting card, so higher than that, but I don't know.
It's tough, isn't it? Because with Højgaard specifically, he basically got his way onto the team by winning the Irish Open last year. That's the tough point that I think people are going to have to get to grips with, is that there was this one big entry requirement or whatever you want to say, qualifying requirement of winning that event, and then he's kind of been able to have a ho-hum season. Now, the flip side of that is that he's had a ho-hum season on the PGA Tour as opposed to the DP World Tour, and since he's come back, he's been great. So if he plays well this week, I don't think there'll be too many complaints, and it'll be a case of just flip-flopping one Højgaard for the other and sticking with what we got in Rome.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Harry Hall was all up in the Twitter sphere with his comments of not, even getting fitted for the outfit, which would have been a real indication that he's not going to be on the team unless he probably wins East Lake, and then it potentially still is a question. I would hope if he wins, he's on the team, but I'm a Harry Hall fan, so, and I'm also a numbers and data nerd, so I see it from both sides in the sense that I'm wildly confused how the Euro team doesn't recognize how good the peripheral numbers of Harry Hall have been, but they're also 10 times smarter than me on how to set up for match play, so I don't fully understand that. I know we could go so long on the Ryder Cup, but what are your thoughts on Harry?
Yeah, I think if you're just looking at who's been the best 12 players, then Harry Hall should be on it from just a complete data perspective, from how impressive he's been on the PGA Tour consistency wise. I think the difficulty with him is he's kind of had the win and then a load of kind of contending, right? Or a load of kind of consistent finishes rather than just constantly second and third. Looks like he's going to win. He's just been so solid as opposed to 3 or 4 spike weeks that probably would have gone in his favour. Right? When Justin Rose goes and wins the FedEx St. Jude, Justin Rose hasn't had a good season as Harry Hall, even finishing first there and second at the Masters, right? In terms of just if people just look at how happy they are with a season as a whole. It's a surprise to me they didn't bother looking at him, if that's what they mean by not fitting him and all these sort of things. It's not a surprise to me that they're not taking him if they don't, because the team just did so well in Rome that I think they're just going, look, if we can leave it alone, we will. And the two things that have kind of happened with that have been Matt Fitzpatrick coming to form. I think he was the biggest question mark. And probably just Shane Lowry just doing enough, just hanging on to those points. Because I feel like he was at risk, really. I know that people won't generally think that. But even we're talking about Victor and Ludwig both have won this season. They're both searching for things in their game. So no one's perfect, and the argument is that Harry Hall's been consistent all the way along, but they're going to stick with the formula that works and try not to disrupt it too much, is the sense I'm getting.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I guess outside of Rasmus, I don't know how much more anyone else can do besides dominate, win again if Penge was to do it. But I think we can transition right into the top of the board. And I already got a tweet this morning talking about, man, if we thought last week's, odds were ugly, not even ugly, but jammed at the top, take a look at what this week is, in the sense of so many golfers between 12 and 25 to 1. Fitzy kind of being our market favorite there, 12s. Then you have 10, or let me get that right, 3, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 other golfers, 25 to 1 and below. I didn't go into the week really with interest in too much of any of them personally. I don't know. I know you ended up actually with 2 golfers here, and it's maybe because you could make honestly a decent case, I feel like, for multiple. We're at the Belfry this week, which I also don't know exactly how I love playing this course, as we've seen now 2 years in a row where golfers who maybe didn't play that tidy, accurate type of style that I thought really fit here the best end up winning, with Nicholas Norgard Moeller and then Daniel Hilliard kind of being crazy wild off the tee and maybe some distance built into his versus the Bland or the Olesen types, right? So I think there's a lot of directions you could have gone, and I'll just let you go right into your 2 golfers at the top of the board.
Yeah, so look, I've started with Rasmus, and we talked about it at the start here about the fact he kind of did throw it away, right? I mean, he had a good opportunity to win it. He was only 1 shot clear going into the final round, so I don't think it's like a complete capitulation. The one thing that's really keeping me so positive about him is, one, his ability to bounce back from that very situation. So if you go back to 2020, he'd finished second at the British Masters. He'd finished 6th at the Hero Open, where he was, expected to win. He shot a final round 72. He was 3rd at the English Championship, and all of a sudden he wins the ISPS Handler in a playoff. Then you go straight right over to 2021. Again, the Kazoo Classic. I think he had a 3-shot lead going into the final round with a Saturday 62. Shot a 72 on Sunday, lost by 2 to Callum Hill. Wins 2 weeks later at Crans on his very next start. He just has this innate ability to put disappointment behind him and go pretty quickly. He was 3rd at the KLM Open in 2023 when he had a chance to win. Then, 3 starts later, even out of form, wins a Maiden Himmerland. And it was the same again. Like, he was 3rd in this 12 months ago. He didn't really have a chance to win because, to your point, Nicholas Norgard had kind of got carried away and was all over it. But 2 weeks later, he goes and beats Rory McIlroy in the Irish Open. So he tends to just, once he shows that sign of going in to win, he does it, at least in the next couple of starts. And the thing for me that really caught my eye was he gained over 4 strokes on approach on the field on Sunday, still, even, throwing away the lead. And it was basically all putter based. And this just happens. It happens to the best players in the world. It happens to Tommy Fleetwood. We talk about Tommy Fleetwood all the time. The difference with Rasmus is he keeps picking it up and going again. And, Tommy does on the DP World Tour, so maybe it's a similar sort of argument, really. But yeah, for me, just with that, the fact that he'd, played so well here 12 months ago, he won here in 2020 in the UK Championship with 67 and 65. He was 16th 3 years ago in the British Masters, 4th going into the final round. He's basically only had 1 bad go around the Belfry. Otherwise, he's been basically in the mix every single time. He's won, finished 3rd, and then been 4th going into Sunday. He fits that prototypical tidy player that you talked about with the added distance as well. So yeah, the fact that he drove the ball so well last week, the fact that he led the field in approach, he's 3rd in driving distance and 12th in accuracy, and it was only his brother that really drove the ball better than him, and another guy that we'll come and talk about. I just think it's amazing. Now, my one reservation is, like, if you only need to finish tie 29 to book your Ryder Cup spot, sometimes people finish 27th and they get really nervous because they just kind of only can achieve the goal they need to achieve. I'm hoping Rasmus just sees this as an event that he goes to try and win. He loves his golf course, nearly won last week, and he kind of does it in style and leaves no questions asked. So that's the spill on Rasmus. And then talking of strong drivers, I just think Jesper Svensson can go down the Norgard route from last year. He led the field in off the tee last week. Very strong. I think he was 1st in distance, 4th in accuracy, 11th in total driving. Muller was 1st in distance and 4th in accuracy. And Svensson did the same, similar last week, 3rd in off the tee, 11th in total driving. He was only 29th last week. We did have 18 birdies, and it was only 2 short of Frederick Lacroix, who had the most. It was 1 less than Marco Peng, who won. He led the field in birdies on the final day. He made 6. So to rank first off the tee, 11th in approach, 15th in tee to green last week, that's really, exciting. And you look at it, 18th for the Canadian Open, 14th for the 3M either side of that, 16th for the Open Championship. He's just in electric form at the higher level, Sky. And yes, the 29th will put people off from last week, but I think the underlying numbers suggest that really we're looking at a better golfer. And he finished 5th here on his debut last year, and got better as the week went on. So to me, there's no real downside to Svensson, other than you might question whether he's worth the 25-1. But this comes back to the point of they don't seem to know how to price this top of the field when it's like this. And the only thing they've got different this week is they've got these kind of Patrick Rogers, Tristan Lawrence, Haotong Lee, all these guys in behind, where you thought they might have stretched them out a little bit further, and they didn't. But those 2 guys I just feel like are the most 2 likely winners for me.
Yeah, I think the biggest realization probably that I've tried to incorporate is in the last year, that at these type of courses, there are paths still where the best drivers of the golf ball can separate immensely. Like, I think the biggest mind-blowing couple were more on the PGA Tour, but Colonial this year ended up being something that benefited drivers immensely in distance. Eldridge Pocketer doing what he does, finished inside the top 10 at Colonial. Detroit Golf Club, by the numbers, didn't really show that much of a benefit to distance. And what it was that leaderboard, that was Thorbjornsen, that was Knapp, that was Pocketer, that was Goddard. All of these guys now at this speed levels just have true unlocked ceilings that can, on a really good driving week, can be so much better than anyone can touch. And Rasmus and probably Jesper in some ways fit into that bill of just such a ceiling that possesses with the driver that even on a golf course as tight as it could be at the Belfry, you could still make things happen that others just don't even have in their bag. So I think I'm starting to understand that angle, and honestly kind of why I'm pretty pro rollback too, is the sense that you'd want a course like this to hopefully give a different skill set out there than just being able to bomb it, but take advantage if these guys are in form and very okay with that.
Yeah, and I think the basic thing on these was always if they can hit it the furthest, they can cut down and be more accurate, and that was the way they used to get around it. But now, to your point, in the rollback argument, is they don't have to do that now because they're just accurate enough by blasting it 320 yards down the tee as well. And look, there is still a skill involved in that, and if you can get around like Moller did, it was an absolute clinic, right? But there is still some sort of defense to Belfry in a sense, I think it's the 10th, right? That's meant to be sort of drivable, but no one ever can go for it. You kind of have to go for it in 2, and I think there is some strategy involved in it still. So, yeah, I think ultimately, to your point, if Svensson has a driving week or Rasmus has a driving week at their very best, they can just tear it apart, and that's quite frightening. But that's why I think they're good bets.
Yeah, I understand it, and the way that I'm kind of leaning into my first golfer at the top of the bill really is I'm kind of shocked again, where you talk about price discovery and trying to feeling out, especially when you get PGA Tour guys coming over. Patrick Rogers could have been priced probably 33s, 28s. And I'm not saying here that 45. Again, I think we bet more on feel than value and potential numbers that we're creating. But I wouldn't have faulted if Patrick Rogers would have been up in those guys. I mean, they're probably taking a little bit more liability on by pricing him at 45-1. It's just he's been eye-catching towards the end of the season for me. Over at Establish the Run, he's forever been known as the bug to us because in our models, he's for some reason or less always projecting as a really good DFS play for us. And I think it's his ability to really hit a ceiling with a driver and the fact that he's also started to show some putting upside finally. This year, it wasn't a bad year for him, right? I mean, he didn't do anything crazy great. I mean, he had the 3rd at the Genesis, which he probably could have won that event, right? He was in the mix Sunday. I think going into Sunday, he was the leader, right? So he could have won there. But then I was very impressed with his 15th recently at the Wyndham Championship, being 3 weeks in a row with some really strong iron play. And again, just I don't know. I think a middling year on the PGA Tour often kind of gets credit when they come over, but it's normally they get the credit when it's a DP World Tour graduate, you know? When you have somebody who hasn't played the British Masters before, like a Patrick Rogers, then they don't know what to do with him. And I'd rather take that kind of risk early on.
Yeah, and I think the one thing you pointed out is like it's not been a crazy year for him, but it's basically been the same sort of year that he always has, right? Like he has these 2 or 3 weeks where you think, okay, he's going to finally get a win. It seems to come in quite big events, so it's not a massive surprise that he doesn't do it. I think to your point, like it's one of those ones where is 45 to 1 great value because he's a really steady PGA Tour player, or should he be 66 to 1 because he lacks win equity at the moment? And if he'd have been playing on the DP World Tour for the last 4 years, he would have won, right? That's the thing. I think this is completely probably irrelevant to his game, but I'm pretty sure his wife is English. So the fact that he comes over here will probably be quite comfortable for him. He might have kind of family to come and support him around as well. He's just a perfect type of player for this. He likes the classical test, and it should really suit him. You just have no idea. Like it's one of those ones where, because we talked about like Troy Merritt last week, I think I sort of mentioned him, right? And he's been pretty solid of late. If he can be solid, Patrick Rogers can be the kind of best player in the field, right? So, I'm really interested to see what he does, because it'd be nice if he played more events and you kind of get a sense of like who he is as a golfer, and not just he turns up 2 or 3 times a year. But good to see what happens.
It's really just the case of if you put everyone's PGA Tour season on paper from the top of the board, probably Fitz and Rye aside, right? Everybody else, I don't know if you could pick anybody out that was so much better than the other one, So the fact that he doesn't have experience over here and hasn't played on the DP World Tour and won or dominated like a lot of these other guys have, probably why he ends up with that price range. So he's my kind of pick of the litter there near the top. Let me see where your next guy. Yeah, sandwich between my next one is your next golfer.
Yeah, just before I go on to that, just talking about players at the top, like one of the ones I was really interested in his price was Alex Noren. Like he had a real long break, right, and then ended the season on the PGA Tour with a 7th at the 3M and a 3rd at the Wyndham, where he shot final round 64 and open round 62. He has played his golf course 2008 or whatever it was, like many moons ago. Alex Noren is a certified winner on the DP World Tour. That when he comes over, you should really kind of take notice. It's just a really hard grab when he's been injured for most of the season, right? But on the face of it, 10 DP World Tour wins, including a British Masters, including a Wentworth and Crans, Scottish Open. He's won basically all the kind of biggest ones. It makes sense he's at the top, but. Going to a similarly experienced player, I guess, in Andy Sullivan, and he is best priced now at 50 to 1 in the US. I just think he's playing some of this really eye-catching golf. He's been 17th or better now in 6 of his last 8 starts. He's only missed 1 cut in that time. I think the other one was a 33rd. Got a really good history in the British Masters. Got 3 top 9 finishes in this. He was 6th in 2021, but also when he was 15th 2 years ago at this golf course, he had the 54-hole lead. So wasn't able to convert it, and that's been the story of Andy Sullivan as he's got later in his career. But he wasn't playing particularly well going into that event, and kind of him to be in the mix was probably quite surprising for him. Now he's playing, really solidly, and he's had 2 7ths in the last 8 starts. He's had those couple of 17th place finishes as well, and 11th, I think. He's just been really, really solid, and at his best, Sky, we're talking about a player that won the Portuguese Open by 9 strokes and the English Championship by 5. Those were his last 2 wins. So the fact he's got 6th, 9th, and 15th place finishes at his golf course, the fact he's been the 54-hole leader, and a couple of years ago, I just think at 50 to 1, he's too big.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like when you wake up in the morning and Andy Sullivan's 7 under through 12 holes, and like you're not surprised. You know what I mean? Like that just kind of happens with
7
Sullivan.
It does go both ways, right? And what really surprised me with Sullivan is probably just because he's lost his hair early, and I don't know how he feels, but he's only 38. People, I think, just assume he's 48 because he's just been around for so long, and he looks a bit older. But he's still got time to kind of really reinvent himself again for a second time. And very popular person on tour. I think he's gone through, plenty of struggles, and still with all of that going on, he's proven to be a pretty reliable winner on his day. Four-time winner. Played in a Ryder Cup in 2016 as well. Like, he's been there and done it. So, as someone that is miles away from where he wants to be in terms of he's never getting the call up for a Ryder Cup in the next couple of years, it would be really good for him to go and get a win on home soil.
Yeah, 100%. The pick for me, if we're talking about kind of home soil bets, would be John Perry.
Yeah.
John Perry did nothing except, what we expected of him at the Nexo Championship. I guess he just kind of flip-flopped his irons for the putter, right? He wasn't really, outside of the Soudal Open this year, have that much magic in the strokes gained data that we have of short game. It just hasn't really been for him. And then at the Nexo, he puts the lights out and kind of loses his trending iron play, right? He had 5-6 weeks in a row with very, very good irons, hadn't missed a cut in that entire range, obviously the top 20 at the Open Championship. So to see him kind of fighting with the best of them, he never really had the chance on Sunday after Forrest kind of ran away with it, but still steady throughout the entire week. Just more of what I've liked to see out of him. You could easily say he's a top 5 to 8 player on the DP World Tour right now. And of course, again, these guys popping over makes things difficult, but with what I'd rather just do is take the informed type of guy at longer odds than what we bet him and had a really good performance 2 weeks ago. I am not that obsessed with how strong the field is to not, think highly of what John Perry's, last 6-8 events have been.
I think we kind of always talk about it. Like, do I want to back John Perry at 28-1, or do I want to wait a couple of weeks and back him at double the odds because he's got a tougher field to play? At the end of the day, if you're playing, to your point, if you're playing well, you're gonna get in the mix. That's why Marco Peng was in the mix at Scottish Open. That's why, Raitan finishes top 20 at the Open Championship. It's all very easy to explain that these players are in form. What you got to look at is, I guess, the Nexo Championship is a perfect illustration of what Perry could do if he could finally putt and hit his irons on the same week. And you've got to see how you take that. Do you take that as great, it's positive that we've actually seen a good putting week from him and now he's just got to get back to his regular irons? Or is it, oh my God, his irons have deserted him and now he's got to rely on his putting, which is really dangerous? Because I guess the difference between Parry, and probably why he's priced the way he is, difference between Parry and that next tier of guys of like Raitan, Spence and Højgaard, is that they can get themselves out of trouble with distance, right? They can just overpower a golf course. But again, last 2 events this season for Parry have been his best driving week. So it
should be better too at a shorter, tighter course for him.
100%. Like, it should be absolutely perfect for him. And that's the beauty of these events, right? And there's a couple of players I want to talk about at long odds that I haven't bet that you think actually they're just going to come good at this type of test. So it makes perfect sense to me. And I agree with the sentiment of just backing them at better odds when they're still playing well, even if the field gets better. Because, like, do we realistically, unless you're expecting Fitz, Rye, and Noren to finish first, second, and third, you can kind of ignore it, right? Like, Jordan Smith's always here and doesn't necessarily live up to it. Laurie Cantor's been very hit and miss. Norgard's got to kind of defend. Rasmus Nergaard Peterson's, blows hot and cold. Wallace doesn't always win, right? Like, it's not like we've got Scotty Scheffler coming over, and that's how we kind of feel, I think, when we see these players on the DP World Tour, and it doesn't seem to play out that way. Yeah,
100%. And at the same time, like, I do respect that these guys can pop over and show up even without form and win. They have historically at experience type of places. So, but even at, a 55-1 with, an each way there, that price plays pretty good for a top 5, which I feel Perry in his form very much can compete up there. Now, between you and I, we're long shots here to kind of round out our cards. High level really didn't do too many triple takes in this kind of lower odd range. Todd Clements comes in with a decent bit of form. Veerman played good last week. But other than that, man, I was definitely honing in down the board. I don't know if you want to go into your selection here, which is the lowest of the odds, and then I can go through pretty quick hitters on my 4 remaining guys.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it very quick. 125 to 1 on Eddie Pepperell. We backed him at the Nexo Championship. He's now like 30 points bigger than he was. He's won the British Masters before. And again, that was like 5 years ago now at Walton Heath. But he played here in 2021, finished 11th, but he was also the 54-hole leader. He had back-to-back rounds of 68 on Friday and Saturday. And look, the concern is whether his driver is going to let him down, because that is still rusty and is problematic, and he gets away with it on links courses. But he ranked 5th on approach, and he can have a tidy short game on any given week and putted quite nicely in the Nexo. So for someone that's finished 1st, 2nd, and 11th across 3 different golf courses in the British Masters, it's obviously an event he loves. He's got the form of contending here after 54 holes, and he's got it all to play for, trying to get back on the DP World Tour. So sticking with Eddie Pepperell after finishing 10th at the Nexo.
Yeah, he was on my short list. And I sent you a long short list, but Eddie was on there for sure, because I like his irons and I like his ability to compete at this event. Yeah, I'm just hoping the event hasn't passed a golfer like him or Perry by, and these guys can attack it differently. I'd like to stick to its roots. And sticking to roots is the rest of my betting card, right? 4 guys, 200 to 1 and longer. No surprise here. First up, if we go with the first golfer, and that is Jason Scrivener. Scrivener, I think back-to-back weeks now where he has been inside the top 5 of both driving accuracy and greens and regulation. It had stood out to me coming out of the Nexo, and then he goes and then he performs well at the Danish Golf Championship. 67 on Friday. And this, to me, again, of the classical golf courses, if you're getting into it, this is what you'd hope, would fit into Scrivener. T25 last year for him here was very strong ball striking, just couldn't really have it with a short game, and a lot more life at the beginning of this year with his putter, with his chipper. It's fallen off as of late, but I think Scrivener, based off of just play Aaron Rai style golf, he can do that, and I think that fits the bill here. He was also inside the top 10 at the Barracuda before those 2 events. So Scrivener 1, I'll go right into the second, then we can pause. Second, again, if I could draw up on paper a course that fits Dan Bradbury. 1, I think I would have started with Le Golf National at its peak. You put him on that Ryder Cup team, I think Dan Bradbury gets you 3 points a few years ago. You just look at the way he plays, which is fairway accuracy in unbelievable irons. That's what he does. Now he also misses cuts. He's got a terrible floor and falls off the map. Yet, when he does get his form, he just pops off 2 random top 10s in a row, a T7, and then the next week a T3 at the Italian Open earlier this year. Only finishes on the whole season inside the top 30, right? Now, he was 7th here or 8th here on debut in 2023. I just think he's a golfer that, again, you play him from the fairway, you give him an ability to separate with your irons, and of course it emphasizes that. He can compete. Round 2 led the field in strokes gained approach. So I'm trying to buy early into the form despite the miscut last week, where he also did lose 4.5 strokes putting. That can be Dan Bradbury too. But if the irons are there, I want to be early on him at 250s in this field.
Yeah, hard to argue with those guys in just terms of ball striking, right? I think Scrivener will enjoy classical test. Dan Bradbury, as you said, this is a perfect type of golf course for him. So completely get both selections. Absolutely.
All right, deeper. We're doubling these odds now. So again, wee hours of the morning tracking the Open Championship. There was 2 notes. Last time I gave you the note on one golfer that I bet, I think 2 weeks ago it was. I'm going back to him. And then the other note that I came across for me was how well Cameron Adam did in hitting his irons at the Open Championship. Again, I love small sample sizes because we don't get the ability to analyze amateur golfers on the big stakes, right? We just don't get that. And even in 2 rounds of Open Championship data, if we can digest the type of player he is, I can remember. I mean, if I think through a few different examples of this, and where you could see, okay, man, this guy might have talent. Like Will Zalatoris played the U.S. Open at Shinnecock as an amateur, I believe, or maybe as he was just getting a pro. I think he hit 17 of 18 greens in regulation when he missed the cut. And I was like, okay, I am marking this down because this type of player. I can remember Eldridge Potgieter playing, at the Masters, like just the eye-popping distance numbers that you see, like you just take note of something. So if Cameron Adam, the way he was, I think he was top 10 or top 5 in approach on one of his days, I think it was the opening day at the Open Championship, like, all right, I think I'm going to note of this. And then, of course, he's had an awesome amateur, year. 5th at the Western Am just a couple weeks ago. T9 at the European Amateur the week before the Open Championship. He had won the St. Andrews Links Trophy, 5th in the regional the week before that. So, again, now we're looking at 4 of his final 5 amateur results being incredibly strong over the last week or over the last month and a half. Like, I just think he's in blitzing form, gets his first DP World Tour start. If he can play that style of golf that he did the Open Championship, I would love to see what it's like at really long odds. We talked about last week how Pablo Arena was 90-1 after just graduating from PGA Tour University and getting his second ever DP World Tour start. We're looking at 10, 15 times the odds, with Cameron Adam. I think there was a 350-1 with 8 places on 365. Like there's some options to bet him with some places too.
Yeah, I have no additional notes than what you just said because you've outlined it great. Like I completely understand, and I saw that you and Barrow were talking about him, and then I completely get it now because you've explained it very nicely.
And I'm trying to see. Let me double check. He didn't play great last week at the Olympic Club, which potentially could have been a course of which would have fit if he was tighter, but also he could have been coming off of Sunday flying across. Like, I'm not putting too much stock into worrying about the way he's been playing and coming over with a little bit more rest. And he's on the Walker Cup. I think he's one of their best players coming up here. So he's first. And the second one that we noted was a couple weeks ago was Riggs Johnson. Yeah. So why I'm sticking with Riggs, he's 600-1 this week. Again, weird year, right? Wins in his second ever start after coming through Q school. We don't know what to think of the player at that point. He looks to be what we thought was going to be like a great American DP World Tour warrior, and he's done nothing the rest of the year, right? Best ever finish other than that was T24. Open Championship stood out because of a single approach round where he took it deep early on. He was 66 in round 2, made the cut, which was great for him. The thing that I'm gathering from Riggs, so I'm just kind of trying to track the round. So last week he shot 70-71 in the first 2 rounds. So he made the cut with ease. I think he was 45th. Yeah. In each of those rounds, he had 2 double bogeys. So to kind of still be, what was he at that point, under par? Yeah, 1 under with 4 double bogeys on your card. I was like, okay, you're starting off well. He led the field last week in approaches inside of 10 feet. So the way I like to try to think through these golfers way down at the board is, do they have a crazy ceiling, right? Because his approach numbers weren't good on the week. So he must just have this really like polarizing spectrum of how well he can play, right? He can probably do on those holes that he double bogeyed, lose 2 strokes on an approach because he's going OB and then has to rally with another approach shot, right? Like, you took some big hits to it, but you also gave yourself a ton of bogey chances or birdie chances, and then he drove the ball better than he has yet this year. So I just think there's a lot more life in that approach play metric than what's showing on paper based off of the summation of the tournament. And if you can get hot enough to win a tournament in your second ever start of the DP World Tour, I guess I've just not given up. Similar to Dan Bradbury, he won on his debut. I just think the ceiling is there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard to argue, isn't it, that when someone goes and does something so impressive straight off the bat, it's how do you rate them? And I guess when they don't follow it up, it's really tough to know. But it makes perfect sense to keep backing someone that is those kind of prices. And as you said, the upside is a win. So
yeah, he put more shots to basically a 50% birdie chance than Peng and Rasmus Højgaard last week. Yeah, it's kind of like the Goth Rasmussen thing. He led the field, or had 19 birdies, and he shot 1 over par.
19 birdies and 1 over is outrageous.
I'm gonna bet him again the next time we get a chance to. That's something in there that's like, holy cow, there is if you limit the mistakes, I can win in any field type of play in there.
Yeah. I've on that same note, and I'll keep it very brief because I'm going to put some notes out later. But two players who, so basically, the Sadao Open seems to be kind of like the perfect link for this, right? Like Guido Migliozzi lost in a playoff here 4 years ago, then won.
Don't remind me, dude. That was the most hurt I've ever been.
Ollison, third in Sadao in 2023, won here. One here and third in Sadao in 2023, and Norgard has been second in Sadao and won here. Ferguson fourth here, and probably should have won Sadao earlier this season. So yeah, and Tristan Lawrence was second to Norgard last year and fourth in Sadao earlier in the year. So two players I took from that at just massive odds. One of them, an old favourite of the show, was Nacho Elvira, who won Ring event at the Sadao Open last year. He's also been in the mix a couple of other times, 16th this year when he's been out of form. So when I think about someone like Nacho Elvira, he just has his upside on these shorter courses. My slight hesitation previously was the fact that he's been kind of 73rd miscut on this golf course, and maybe just doesn't like it. And as simple as that, it doesn't matter how often you kind of shoehorn these courses in, he might not just suit them. But at 500 to 1, I think I'm going to kind of pick him. And actually, we're talking about Riggs Johnston. It just kind of reminded me about Angel Hidalgo beating John Rahm in Spain. And also in that field was Tommy Fleetwood, David Pooch, Tyrrell Hatton, Patrick Reed. I mean, not anymore as a big name, but was a big name. Jimmy Walker, Shane Lowry was in that field, Nirgard Peterson. All of these players, and Hidalgo came out on top in pretty exciting fashion that week. And when you look at the rest of his places, he's succeeded at fourth at Valderrama, fifth at the Joburg Open. Just seems to play these kind of courses nicely. And again, you look at his Sadao record, and he's got a couple of 15th place finishes and a 22nd there as well. Finished 39th in this event last year. Again, not a massive result, but does show that he can get around the course, and he was 20th at halfway. So Elvira 500, Nacho Elvira to be clear, 500 to 1, and Angel Hidalgo 600 to 1. I think are both worth looking at.
Yeah, Angel, electric. I do think that on their best days, there are definite opportunities, probably the most opportunity for DP World Tour to have these long shots come through. And it's been a while since we had one really in the mix, so it would be fun to get there for us. I mean, last week it still felt really good about the process overall. Just didn't have the top of the board right ones, but feel like this is kind of getting to the thick of it for the DP World Tour for us, and really feel strong about what we're doing. For those listening, audio, make sure you give a shout out to all of the platforms. You can find us on Daily Fantasy Sports Picks and Bets, The Mix. Again, Mayo Media Network supporting us everywhere. YouTube, leave the comments, like the video. You can rate, review, subscribe. It just goes super long way for Tom and myself and Pat and Paul kind of overseeing this operation. So super thankful as always as you guys do that. Tom, if you want to go high level here, overview your card.
Yeah, Rasmus Højgaard 18 to 1, Jesper Svensson 25 to 1, Andy Sullivan 50 to 1, Eddie Pepperell 125 to 1, and I think it's worth looking at Nacho Elvira at 500 to 1 and Angel Hidalgo at 600.
I'm proud of you for that card, Tom. That's got some long shots on it. I'll go Patrick Rogers 45 to 1, John Perry 55, Jason Scrivener 200, Dan Bradbury 250, Cameron Adam best price 500 to 1, got a top 10 on there, and then Riggs Johnson 600 to 1 with a top 10 as well. Again, the Belfry is an awesome event. Nick Faldo kind of being host this week, so should be a great viewing. And then we hit that stretch run, right? I mean, we're going to see hopefully after the PGA Tour season wraps up, a lot more of these Ryder Cuppers coming over to play here. Looks like Kranz is getting even like Wyndham Clark I saw on the field next week. And then, from Kranz, we'll go right into the Irish Open, Wentworth. So a big stretch coming up here. So best of luck, everybody. Super appreciative. Tom, thank you as always. And we'll catch you guys next week for Kranz. Good luck, everybody.
Thanks, guys.